The auction hammer slammed down for the third time that afternoon, and still no one wanted Thunder. The massive black stallion stood in the center of the ring, his coat dull and patchy, ribs visible beneath scarred hide. Dried mud caked his hooves, and his mane hung in tangled knots that spoke of months of neglect. But it was his eyes that told the real story, dark, hollow, and filled with a pain so deep it seemed to echo through the dusty arena. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer's voice carried across the sparse crowd of buyers, most of whom had already turned their attention to their phones or the next lot. Thunder had been rejected by 3 different bidders in the past hour alone. Too aggressive, they said, too damaged, too much work. 12-year-old Maverick Holloway pressed his face against the chain-link fence, watching the scene unfold with growing frustration. His father, Dane, stood beside him, arms crossed, shaking his head. That horse is broken, son. Sometimes they just can't be fixed. But Maverick saw something different. When Thunder's wild gaze swept across the crowd, searching for any sign of kindness, any glimmer of hope, their eyes met. For a moment that stretched like eternity, the chaos of the auction house fell away. The jeers and whispers faded. The stamping feet and nervous whinnies of other horses became distant echoes. In that instant, Maverick saw past the scars and the fear. He saw a creature who had been betrayed by every human who had ever claimed to care for him. He saw intelligence, flickering behind the pain, a spirit that refused to be completely crushed despite everything that had been done to him. Thunder's nostrils flared as he took a step forward, his massive head lowering slightly. The crowd tensed, expecting another display of the aggression that had made him infamous throughout the county. Instead, the stallion simply stood there, studying the boy with an intensity that made Maverick's heart race. "Dad," Maverick whispered, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise. "We have to help him." Dane followed his son's gaze and saw the interaction between boy and horse. He had spent 30 years working with animals, and he had never seen anything quite like this. The stallion, who had been throwing himself against the holding pen walls just minutes before, stood perfectly still, his attention completely focused on Maverick. "That animal has been through 4 different owners in 2 years," Dane said quietly. "Each one gave up on him. The last family returned him after he put a man in the hospital." "He's not bad," Maverick said, his voice growing stronger, with conviction. "He's just scared. Look at him, Dad. Really look." Thunder's ears twitched forward, a subtle sign of interest that most people would have missed. But Maverick caught it, and something shifted in his chest. He had always been drawn to the unwanted, the forgotten, the creatures that others deemed too difficult or damaged to love. His bedroom was already home to a 3-legged cat, a blind crow, and a turtle with a cracked shell. The auctioneer raised his gavel one final time. "Last chance for this fine specimen. Do I hear $50? Silence filled the arena like a held breath. Thunder's head turned back to Maverick, and in that moment, the boy made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'll take him," Maverick called out, his young voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. The auction house erupted in murmurs and concerned glances. Dane's face went pale as he realized what his son had just done. The auctioneer looked confused, scanning the crowd for the source of the bid. "That was a child," someone called out. "He can't bid on livestock." But Dane stepped forward, his hand finding Maverick's shoulder. Something in his son's expression of determination he had never seen before made him pause. "The bid stands," he said, his voice carrying across the arena. $50 for the stallion. Thunder's reaction was immediate and startling. The tension that had coiled his muscles for months seemed to release all at once. He took another step toward the fence where Maverick stood, and for the first time in anyone's memory, the stallion's ears moved forward in a gesture of curiosity rather than aggression. "Sir, I have to advise against this purchase," the facility manager approached them as the paperwork was being processed. "This horse has a documented history of violence. We're only selling him because the alternative is..." He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Maverick felt a chill run down his spine. Thunder wasn't just unwanted, he was running out of time. The realization hit him like a physical blow, and he pressed closer to the fence. The stallion had moved as near as the barriers would allow, and now stood with his massive head just inches from Maverick's outstretched hand. "What happened to him?" Maverick asked, his voice tight with emotion. The manager's expression softened. "Slightly, best we can piece together. He was a racehorse originally, good bloodlines, trained for the track, but something went wrong during a race, a fall, maybe an injury. After that, he was passed around from owner to owner. Each one promised they could handle him, but..." He shrugged. "Fear makes animals dangerous, son, and this one's been afraid for a long time." Thunder's breath was warm against Maverick's palm as the boy held it steady against the fence. The stallion's nostrils flared, taking in the boy's scent, processing this new human who didn't smell of fear or anger or frustration. Instead, there was something else, something Thunder hadn't encountered in so long. He had almost forgotten it existed. "He's not dangerous," Maverick said with quiet certainty. "He's just tired of being hurt." Dane watched his son with growing amazement. Maverick had always been special with animals, but this was different. This was as if he could see directly into the horse's soul. When the facility manager finally handed over the lead rope, Dane half expected Thunder to bolt or rear dot instead. The stallion stood perfectly still as Maverick approached. The boy moved slowly, talking in low, soothing tones about everything and nothing: the weather, the other horses, the way the afternoon light slanted through the dusty arena windows. Thunder's ears swiveled to catch every word, and gradually, the wild look in his eyes began to soften. "Easy, boy," Maverick murmured as he reached for the lead rope. "I know you're scared. I know people have hurt you, but I'm not like them. I promise you that." The moment Maverick's fingers closed around the rope, Thunder's head dropped lower, a sign of submission that shocked everyone watching. The stallion, who had been declared untrainable, who had sent grown men running for safety, was suddenly calm. In the presence of a 12-year-old boy, Dot, as they walked toward the trailer, Thunder stayed close to Maverick's side, his massive hooves moving carefully to avoid stepping on the boy's feet. It was as if he understood, on some primal level, that this human was different, that maybe, just maybe, he had found someone who would see past the scars and the fear to the heart that still beat beneath all that pain. The drive home was quiet except for the rhythmic sound of Thunder's hooves against the trailer floor, but it wasn't the panicked thrashing they had expected. It was the steady, patient sound of a horse who had finally found a reason to hope. The Holloway Ranch sat on 40 acres of rolling hills just outside Willowbrook, a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. By the time Dane's truck and trailer pulled into the gravel driveway, word had already spread about Maverick's unexpected purchase. Neighbors gathered along the fence line, some curious, others concerned, all wondering what the boy planned to do with a horse that had defeated every other owner. Maverick's mother, Celeste, waited by the barn with her arms crossed and worry lines etched across her face. She had heard the stories about Thunder, and the thought of that dangerous animal on their property made her stomach clench with fear. But when she saw her son's face through the truck window, bright with hope and determination, her anger softened into reluctant acceptance. "Maverick James Holloway," she called as he jumped down from the cab. "You better know what you're doing." "I do, Mom," he replied, moving toward the trailer with confident steps. "He just needs someone to understand him." Thunder had traveled better than anyone expected, but when the trailer door opened, he hesitated. The ranch was new territory, filled with unfamiliar sounds and smells. The gathered crowd made him nervous, and for a moment, his old instincts kicked in. His nostrils flared, and his muscles tensed, ready to fight or flee. But then Maverick's voice cut through the chaos. "It's okay, Thunder, you're home now." The stallion's ears pricked forward at the word home. It was a concept he had almost forgotten, a place where he belonged, where he was wanted, where he didn't have to prove himself every single day just to earn his next meal. As Thunder backed slowly out of the trailer, the crowd held its collective breath. The horse was even more imposing in the afternoon sunlight, his black coat gleaming despite the scars that crisscrossed his flanks. He stood nearly 17, hence, tall, with the powerful build of a horse bred for speed and endurance. "He's beautiful," whispered Mrs. Grayson from across the fence, and several people nodded in agreement. Beneath the neglect and trauma, Thunder was indeed a magnificent animal. Maverick led him toward the barn, talking constantly in that same soothing tone. Thunder's head turned constantly, taking in every detail of his new surroundings. The other horses in the nearby paddock watched with interest, and Thunder's ears flicked toward them with tentative curiosity. "That's Buttercup," Maverick said, pointing to a golden mare who had come to the fence. "She's really friendly. And that's Jasper. He's old, but he's wise. They're going to be your friends." The word friends seemed to hit Thunder like a physical blow. His steps faltered, and he turned to look at Maverick with an expression of such raw vulnerability that several onlookers felt tears prick their eyes. "Yeah," Maverick continued, as if reading the horse's thoughts, "friends. I know you don't remember what that feels like, but you will, I promise." The barn was clean and well-maintained, with spacious stalls and fresh hay. Maverick led Thunder to the largest stall, one that had been empty for months. The stallion sniffed the air, processing the scents of other horses, fresh bedding, and something else, safety. "This is yours," Maverick said, opening the stall door. "No one's going to take it away from you. No one's going to hurt you here." Thunder stepped into the stall and immediately began investigating every corner, every surface. His behavior was methodical, almost obsessive, as if he was mapping out escape routes and potential threats. But gradually, as the familiar sounds of a working stable surrounded him, horses moving in their stalls, the gentle rustle of hay, the distant sound of water running, he began to relax. Maverick stayed with him, sitting on an overturned bucket, just outside the stall door. He didn't push or try to force interaction. He simply existed in Thunder's space, a calm presence that asked for nothing and offered everything. As the sun began to set, painting the barn in shades of gold and amber, Thunder finally approached the stall door. He stretched his neck toward Maverick, and the boy held perfectly still as the stallion's soft muzzle brushed against his hair. "Good boy," Maverick whispered. "You're safe now. You're home." For the first time in years, Thunder allowed himself to believe it might be true. The first week was a careful dance of trust and patience. Maverick spent every morning before school and every afternoon after sitting with Thunder. Never pushing, never demanding. He would read aloud from his favorite books, talk about his day, or simply exist in comfortable silence while the stallion learned to accept his presence. Dr. Helena Vance, the local veterinarian, made a house call on the third day. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had seen every kind of animal trauma imaginable. But even she was surprised by Thunder's condition. "He's been through hell," she told Dane and Celeste privately while Maverick stayed with Thunder. "Malnourished, old injuries that healed wrong, and psychological trauma that runs deep. Most horses in his condition would have given up by now. But he hasn't," Celeste observed. "No," Dr. Vance agreed, watching through the barn window as Thunder allowed Maverick to brush dust from his coat. "He's found something to hold on to. That boy of yours has a gift." The gift was evident in small ways. Thunder would nicker softly when Maverick approached, a sound of welcome that he had never made for any other human. He would stand perfectly still during grooming sessions, his eyes half closed in contentment as Maverick worked patiently through the tangles in his mane. But it was the way Thunder looked at Maverick that truly amazed everyone. The wild, desperate look in his eyes was gradually being replaced by something warmer, more trusting. He watched the boy's every movement, as if memorizing the face of the human who had chosen him when no one else would. School became a challenge for Maverick. He found himself watching the clock, counting minutes until he could return to Thunder. His teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, noticed his distraction and called Celeste to discuss it. "He's not failing," she assured Maverick's mother, "but his mind is clearly elsewhere. He talks about that horse constantly." Celeste sighed. "I'm worried he's too attached. If something happens to Thunder." But something was happening to Thunder, something good. Each day brought small victories. He began eating more regularly, putting on weight that filled out his gaunt frame. His coat grew shinier, and the wild look in his eyes continued to fade. The breakthrough came during Maverick's second week with Thunder. The boy had been sitting in the stall, reading a book about wild horses, when Thunder approached and lowered his great head to rest against Maverick's shoulder. The gesture was so unexpected. so tender that Maverick felt tears spring to his eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Thunder's lips began to move against the boy's hair, a gentle grooming behavior that horses use to show affection to their herd mates. He's accepting you as part of his herd, Dr. Vance explained when Maverick excitedly told her about the moment. In horse society, that's the highest honor. You're not just his owner now, you're his family. The word family seemed to unlock something in Thunder. He began to show interest in the other horses, approaching the fence that separated him from Buttercup and Jasper. His ears were forward, his posture relaxed, signs that he was ready to rejoin the social world he had been forced to abandon. Maverick decided it was time to try something ambitious. On a Saturday morning, with his parents watching nervously from the barn, he led Thunder into the large paddock with the other horses. The meeting was tense at first. Thunder stood close to Maverick, his body language uncertain. Buttercup and Jasper approached carefully, their own instincts telling them that this newcomer carried the scent of trauma and fear. But horses are remarkably perceptive creatures, and they seemed to understand that Thunder needed gentleness. Buttercup was the first to approach, extending her neck to touch noses with the stallion. Thunder flinched initially, but didn't retreat. Gradually, cautiously, he returned the greeting. Jasper followed, and within minutes, the three horses were standing together peacefully, a small herd united by their shared understanding of Maverick's special gift. "Look at that," Dane murmured to his wife. "He's teaching them to be gentle with each other." Celeste nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He's teaching them to heal." 3 months after Thunder's arrival, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The gaunt, frightened stallion had become a magnificent horse whose coat gleamed like polished obsidian. In the morning sun, he had gained nearly 100 pounds, his muscles filling out to reveal the athletic build that had once made him a promising racehorse. But the physical changes were nothing compared to the emotional ones. Thunder had developed a personality that delighted everyone who met him. He was playful with the other horses, gentle with the barn cats, and absolutely devoted to Maverick. The boy could hardly step into the barn without Thunder nickering a greeting and trotting over to investigate what new adventures the day might bring. Word of the transformation had spread throughout the county. Dr. Vance had been telling other veterinarians about the case, and soon animal behaviorists and horse trainers were asking to visit the Holloway Ranch. They came expecting to see some revolutionary new training method, but instead found a 12-year-old boy who simply treated a damaged horse with infinite patience and love. "There's no secret," Maverick told Dr. Patricia Fleming, a renowned equine psychologist who had driven 3 hours to study Thunder's recovery. "I just listened to him. He told me what he needed." Dr. Fleming was skeptical until she saw the pair together. Maverick could communicate with Thunder using the subtlest of signals: a slight shift in posture, a change in breathing, a barely perceptible gesture. The horse responded instantly, as if they shared a language that existed beyond words. "It's like they're connected," Dr. Fleming observed to Dane. "I've never seen anything like it." The connection was about to be tested in ways none of them expected. The Willowbrook County Fair was approaching, and with it, the annual horse show. Maverick had been attending the show every year since he was old enough to walk, dreaming of the day he would have a horse worthy of competition. "Thunder's ready," he announced to his parents one evening at dinner. "I want to enter him in the show." Celeste nearly choked on her water. "Maverick, honey, Thunder's made amazing progress. But he's still a rescued horse. He's never been in a show environment. All those people, all that noise, he can handle it." Maverick said with quiet confidence, "I know he can." Dane was torn. He could see the determination in his son's eyes, the same look that had led him to bid on Thunder in the first place. But he also knew that county fairs could be chaotic, overwhelming environments for even the most well-trained horses. "What if something goes wrong?" Dane asked. "What if he gets scared and reverts to his old behavior?" "Then we'll deal with it," Maverick replied. "But I think you're underestimating him. He's not the same horse who came off that trailer. He's not afraid anymore." The decision was made when Thunder himself seemed to weigh in on the conversation. The stallion had wandered up to the kitchen window and was peering inside, his ears pricked forward with curiosity. When he saw Maverick, he whinnied softly, a sound of greeting that had become as familiar as a favorite song. "He wants to show people what he can do," Maverick said. Rising from the table to go to the window, Thunder immediately pressed his nose against the glass, leaving a foggy print. He's proud of how far he's come. The registration deadline was only 3 days away. That night, Dane filled out the paperwork for the amateur adult and youth classes, his hand trembling slightly as he wrote Thunder's name in the spaces provided. He had no idea what they were getting themselves into, but he trusted his son's instincts. The next morning, Maverick began preparing Thunder for the show with the same methodical patience he had used for everything else. They practiced standing still for extended periods, walking in precise patterns, and responding to subtle cues. Thunder approached each exercise with eager attention, as if he understood that something important was coming. "You're going to show them," Maverick told him during one of their practice sessions. "You're going to show them what you really are." Thunder's ears flicked forward, and his eyes held a spark of something that looked remarkably like anticipation. After months of learning to trust again, he was ready to prove that some horses and some bonds were worth believing in. The morning of the county fair dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of perfect weather that made everyone believe in new beginnings. Maverick had been awake since before sunrise, his stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and nerves. This was Thunder's moment, their moment to show the world what healing looked like. The fairgrounds were already bustling with activity when the Holloway trailer pulled into the parking area. Horses of every size and color were being unloaded, their coats gleaming from hours of careful grooming. Professional trainers barked instructions to their students, and the air was filled with the sound of whinnying, stomping hooves, and nervous laughter. Thunder stepped out of the trailer with his head held high, his coat gleaming like black silk in the morning sun. He surveyed the scene with calm interest, his ears forward, his posture relaxed. The frightened, broken horse from the auction house had been replaced by a confident animal who seemed to understand that he belonged here. "Would you look at that?" murmured Jake Brennan, a local trainer who had been working with horses for 30 years. "Is that the same stallion from the auction? The one they said was dangerous?" The whispers followed them as Maverick led Thunder toward the show ring. People who had heard the stories, who had seen Thunder at his worst, could hardly believe their eyes. The transformation was so complete it seemed almost impossible. Dr. Vance appeared at their side, her face beaming with pride. "He looks magnificent," she said, running her hand along Thunder's neck. "You've done something remarkable here, Maverick." The amateur youth class was scheduled for mid-morning, giving them time to acclimate to the environment. Maverick walked Thunder around the grounds, letting him see the other horses, hear the sounds of the crowd, feel the energy of the competition. Thunder remained calm and focused, his attention divided between the fascinating sights around him and the boy at his side. When their class was called, Maverick felt his heart begin to race. This was at the moment when months of patience and love would be put to the test. He led Thunder into the ring and immediately felt the stallion's energy shift, not toward fear or aggression, but toward something that could only be described as joy. Thunder seemed to understand that this was his stage, his chance to show everyone what he had become. He moved with a grace and power that took the breath away from everyone watching. His gaits were smooth and controlled. His responses to Maverick's cues were instantaneous and precise. The judge, a respected horseman named Walter Kemp, watched their performance with growing amazement. He had judged thousands of horses over his 40-year career, but he had never seen anything quite like the connection between this boy and his stallion. They moved as one entity, communicating through signals so subtle they were nearly invisible. "Beautiful horse," Judge Kemp commented as they completed their pattern. "What's his story?" "He's a rescue," Maverick replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Everyone said he was broken, but he just needed someone to believe in him." Judge Kemp nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Thunder. The stallion stood perfectly still, his head held high, his entire bearing radiating confidence and pride. This was not a horse who had been broken by trauma. This was a horse who had been reborn through love. The final placings were announced with the traditional ceremony. 6th place, 5th place, Fourth place. Maverick felt his heart sinking slightly. But then he looked at Thunder and realized that the ribbons didn't matter. They had already won something far more valuable than any prize. Third place. The announcer called and another rider stepped forward. Second place, and still no call for Thunder. Maverick was preparing to leave the ring when the announcer's voice rang out clear and strong. First place, Thunder, ridden by Maverick Holloway. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. People were standing, whistling, some wiping tears from their eyes. They had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a horse show victory, but a triumph of the human spirit and the incredible power of unconditional love. Thunder seemed to understand the significance of the moment. He arched his neck proudly as the blue ribbon was pinned to his bridle, and when Maverick leaned forward to hug him, the stallion nickered softly, a sound of pure contentment. Judge Kemp approached them as they left the ring. "Son," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "in all my years of judging, I've never seen anything like what you have together. That horse would do anything for you, and I'd do anything for him." Maverick replied, his hand resting on Thunder's neck, "We saved each other." As they walked toward the trailer, Thunder's head held high and his blue ribbon fluttering in the breeze, Maverick realized that this was just the beginning. They had proven that healing was possible, that love could triumph over fear, that sometimes the most broken souls could become the most beautiful. The horse rejected by everyone had found his person, and the boy who saw potential where others saw only problems had found his partner. Together, they had discovered that the strongest bonds are forged not in perfection, but in the courage to believe in each other when no one else will. Thunder's story would be told for years to come, inspiring other rescuers, other trainers, other young people who dreamed of making a difference. But for now, it was enough to know that a horse who had once been destined for the worst possible fate was going home with a blue ribbon and a boy who loved him more than life itself. Sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to look past the scars and see the heart beneath. Sometimes, one moment of connection can change everything. And sometimes, the most beautiful transformations happen when we least expect them. Between a broken horse and a boy who refused to give up on hope,